Hey Dee, did you see that thing I sent you about glimmers?
Yes, and one of the glimmers is when you see all the messages we've received from listeners through the new Buzzsprout feature that allows them to text us.
Yes. And so just briefly, glimmers are the opposite of triggers. They're things that make you happy.
They do make me happy. I wish that Buzzsprout would tell us who they are, but that's okay.
I know, but we have gotten messages from Oklahoma City, the Guthrie area, just going through the list, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Charlottetown, Pennsylvania, South Bend, Indiana, Indianapolis, Indiana, Kankakee, Illinois, Dallas, Texas. Did I miss any, D?
Chattanooga, Tennessee, maybe?
I think I said Chattanooga.
You might have. You might have. Yeah, they say nice things about us. Sometimes they offer us their opinions on things, which I appreciate. And I just appreciate our listeners.
I do too. And one thing we should comment is those text messages are wonderful. And like you said, sometimes good info to add to what we've talked about, but we don't know who they are. We just get a city. So if somebody wants an answer, they do need to email us at
Yes,
thegardenangelist@gmail.com because then we can actually answer. But
right.
we could talk about this all day, but I bet our listeners would actually like to hear a new episode. Hit it.
Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on an acre and a half out of 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Good morning, Dee.
Good morning, Carol. How's your garden?
Well, it's good. We are back to Friday, which means we just recorded 5 days ago, 4 days ago.
Yeah, something like that. It felt, I mean, I'm serious. I looked at the schedule and I went, oh, wow. Okay. I've got to update my notes. Yeah, we just did this. So, what did you do this week in
So
that
I
5 days?
Garden Club met at the Idlejarg Museum, which is a museum of Native American and Western art downtown. But several volunteer groups, master gardeners, Native Plant Society, all kinds of groups have planted native gardens on the museum grounds up by the entrance and out by the street. And so we toured those, and naturally I saw two plants that I wanted in my garden. The native blue salvia, Salvia aureoria, and poppy mallow, which is Calleryho bushii.
Yep,
And
I've
I
grown both
started to
of
look
them.
for seeds, and I thought, I wonder if Nan Andra has seeds for these.
Of course,
And she did at Hayfield. And so I ordered those, and within like 5 minutes, I had a reply that says, "Thanks for the order, Carol. It's going to be in the mail tomorrow." And sure enough, I've already got them, and I'm going to
Nan's
winter sow
so
them.
on the ball. She is
She
so on the
is.
ball.
She
And
is.
that native blue salvia. So I'll tell you my little story of trying to find it because I see it when I turn on my main road to go to my house off of the
Uh-huh.
highway. And it's there every year growing in the worst soil of all time. Sandy,
Good to know.
but the worst. And so it's the most exquisite color of blue. It's the color of the sky in Oklahoma right now. This light,
It is beautiful.
gorgeous blue, right? Could not find seeds for it. Didn't think of Nan. Could not figure out how to grow it. Could not, didn't want to, I never could get to gather the seeds in the fall from, because you aren't supposed to dig up native plants, but you can gather seeds. So I was at the Native Plant Festival last year, which they're getting ready to do again this year. And I'll be darned, somebody had 3 plants of it. What happened to those plants?
Those three plants got bought by D.
They landed in my garden as fast as possible. And I brought them home, and it is blooming out there right now. And it is beautiful. It is
Well,
beautiful.
I'll tell
Growing
you
in
what.
crummy soil. Crummy.
She says on the
That's what.
salvia that it was 15 plus seeds, and I'm looking at this packet, which is, that clear stuff.
Yeah.
There's probably 50 seeds in there. And then on the poppy mallow, it said 20 plus.
Yeah.
I would guess there's probably 40 or 50. I'm going to winter sow maybe half, and then I'll sow half inside later in the spring. But anyway, not to get too far ahead, it has been extremely dry, and I only mowed
Here
in
too.
front where I've been watering because the back is just, it kind of reminds me a little bit of 2012, which was horrible. So
When I
I
was
hope we
there,
get
right?
rain. That was
Were
2011,
we?
also bad.
Oh, and it was also horrible because you guys were trying so hard to put on a great tour for everybody for GardenCom. And wow, I was impressed because it was dry there.
Well, the secret to that, getting those gardens picked for that tour, is we went and looked at those gardens, or the committee that found them looked at that same time a year before and said, how does this look as a late summer, early fall garden? Because
Right.
if it was a garden geared towards early spring, it wasn't going to be worth much. So that's how we able to pick out some good gardens. But anyway, so I mowed and I putted around and I kept containers watered, and I thought, I wonder if I am thinking about putting some sprinklers out in the back and just soaking everything, because there seems to be no chance of rain for weeks.
Here either. There's no chance of rain. Nowhere. Unless we get a tropical storm.
Well, I would have thought that Hurricane Francine, which was in New Orleans this week, would come up and bump into Oklahoma.
Nope, it came up just east of us. So we got nothing. Nothing.
And I looked at the radar this morning, and people are like, get on with it, Carol. Southwestern Indiana was getting quite a bit of rain, but it kind of like whooshed and went over into Ohio without even coming north of, say,
Yeah.
Bloomington, which is
Yeah.
an hour south of here. Anyway,
Oh, well, that's the way it goes. Okay, so I ordered 3 peonies from my favorite place to order peonies, which is Peonies Envy. And they're going to go in front of my angel bird bath where I pulled out 3 roses. And I'm clearing out things that I don't love in the garden right now. And that is
yay.
that I realized. So so the back garden, just for people who don't know, the back garden is a design from Kitchen Gardener magazine 1,000 years ago.
Right?
And we love our Kitchen Gardener magazine
Yes, we
for
do.
so much, right? And so it originally was a vegetable garden. And it is a diamond shape with 4 triangles, 2 long beds on the right side, then builded a mirror image on the left. So on the right side, I have that cleared out now. I mean, it
Yay.
looks doggone good, and I'm going to do a video today. Then on the left side, I turned and looked and I was like, holy moly, that is terrible. The New York ironweed, the smooth ironweed, has
Right?
taken over. So I went to the internet and read up on smooth ironweed, which appeared there by itself because it is a native in Oklahoma. It may not be New York ironweed, but it's a smooth ironweed. And so I looked at it and I thought, and I read about its root system. And then I was filled with terror because I was like, son of a gun. And that has gotten into everything. So I started digging it out. My helper friend who comes and helps me occasionally, she has been helping me. And together we dug that out. And I realized when I was working on it how great I feel. So I wanted to share that with
Excellent.
you.
That is
I
excellent.
feel so much better. And I realized that for 2 years, I felt lousy. And I didn't even, I mean, I knew it, but you can tell in my garden. So my daughter came over 2 days ago with a little bit, and they were walking the garden. And Megan came back inside and she said, Mom, your garden is so peaceful. And I said, because I've cleared out a bunch of the junk. And
Yes.
so we're still working on the ironweed. And that made me think while I was out there digging it up. When you're digging out a weed or overgrown perennial, you need to know your enemy.
Yes.
And so, for example, with Goldsturm, another one I dig out regularly, I know it so well now. Everything comes from this little crown, and then it has rhizotomous stems that go underground and go to the next thing, and they develop
Exactly.
down another crown. So the best time to pull out Goldsturm is in fall when it's blooming, or late summer. Pull that sucker out because it's not very strong because it's putting all that energy into that bloom, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good time to get it out. And also, someone online asked me what I do with my Cobra head. They never use theirs, Cobra head weeder, which we're
Oh,
going to link to in this podcast.
yes, we are.
The
Oh,
Cobra
yes,
head
we
people,
are.
we adore. Annalise Valdez is one of my favorite people on this planet and her family. And so I was like, what do you not use your, I mean, I use it for everything.
It's so perfect for digging out stuff that's got rhizotomous roots because you can just pull up under that root and pull that thing out. I have the short-handled one. I have
The long-handled one.
a long-handled one. I have the mini, and I remember I lost the mini earlier this summer, and I had to replace it. I mean, I ordered it up, and I got a real nice thanks, Carol. On the I don't know if they put everybody a thank you, but I think they knew it was
But I
me.
think they knew it was you. And so I use this all the time. And I used it. I used both my shovels and I used my cover head to also get out this smooth ironweed. And we have almost got it all out of that garden because after I read about its root system, I was like, that cannot be in a perennial garden. It needs to be out in the field where it should live.
So I want to back up a minute to something you said where some native plants have just shown up because they're native.
Yeah.
So in the middle of this native garden in downtown Indianapolis, they said that once they planted the garden, native plants that they didn't plant actually showed up there, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah. Happens here all the time. All the time. But granted, I live in this country and I'm surrounded by areas that have native plants. But I can tell you, I have native stuff just show up everywhere. And some of it I'm thrilled about, but
yes.
And I love smooth ironweed. Don't get me wrong. It is beautiful. Native plant people do not come for me. It just can't live in this beautiful little garden back here.
It could live up in the meadow.
Oh, it does live up in the meadow. It lives up in the meadow. It lives in another spot. So I have it all over the place.
So the thing I was thinking about is the Idlejourg Museum, for those who are local, is on the corner of, I forget which street, Washington and West Streets. I don't know. I can't remember. Anyway, I know how to get there. It's on Washington Street. But just down from it is the Indianapolis Zoo and White River Gardens, and they've got a lot of native plants at the White River Garden. And it is possible that with birds, maybe even wildlife, and when some of those seeds have blown over into the Idlejourg Museum's gardens, that may be where they came from.
Sure could be. So I think that's enough about that because we're going to have another giant long episode again. Play favorites. What's your favorite this week?
Okay, so Tuesday morning, I got the text from the local greenhouse. The pansies and violas were in, and the text literally said, "Pansies are here." And I was out getting my hair cut, and then I came back, and guy was working in my crawl space. I had to wait for him to get done, and so anyway, I rushed down there, and they had pansies and violas. I got 2 flats of pansies and 2 flats of violas, and so that has to be my favorite this week. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, of course. So my favorite this week is purple fountain grass. And this is my plea for purple fountain grass. I plant it in my pots, and it's usually the centerpiece of my pots on my deck. And I love it because, like right now, I'm looking at it from my office, and it waves in the wind, and it has beautiful color, and it looks great all summer. And as long as you water your pots, it's happy, 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 joy, joy. So my plea for it is, if you dig something out in the spring and you aren't sure what you want to put back there as a structure plant in my state,
yes,
I plant a clump of purple fountain grass. And my clients always look at me like, are you kidding? And I'm like, no, I'm not kidding, because it's a tropical here. It's a tropical where you live.
Yes.
It looks great in your garden. It adds height, it adds color, it adds contrast, and it gives you time to think about, do I want to put a shrub there? Do I want to put a native grass? What do I want to do there? And so I'm like, if you don't know what to plant somewhere and it's middle, kind of the middle part or even the front, just plant purple fountain grass because it'll make you happy. That's my tip.
There you go. What a nice tip. So, question of the week. You have the question of the week. Finally, we're off that old question.
So the question of the week, I had a whole bunch of them this week and I did not save them all. And they were on Instagram, but I did a garden coaching session. And this is what she asked: how do I make my garden thrive? And she has lots of beds around her house, and she has a bed around her. She has a really nice bed up against her metal building in the back, her big, pretty shed. And she wanted to put in 2 more beds, and she has all these beautiful dreams. And I said, how do you water? And she goes, I hand water it all. And I said, no, no, no. There's in my climate, in the Oklahoma climate or further south, or I'd say Kansas even, you are going to have to figure out some way to water your plants because you cannot possibly water that all by hand and help it thrive. And a lot of her plants were very parched because, as we said earlier, this is a great lead in. It's dry here and it's dry in Indianapolis right now.
Right.
So I don't care how you water. You need to water with soaker hoses, which I did for years. You need to water with drip irrigation, which is the most efficient thing, or you need to water with a sprinkler. But just keep in mind that when you use a sprinkler, it causes disease sometimes because you'll get more mildew on your zinnias or you'll get more black spot on your roses and things like that. So you cannot water that much stuff by hand and do it well, especially if you have 2 jobs, teenage kids. Even I can't do it. I mean, I can't. So water is really essential. Water, compost, mulch.
Water, compost, mulch. Yes. And so the other thing is, like right now in the fall, I can look around and see very easily the plants that do great with very little water and the ones that suffer. And so sometimes also you just decide, well, it always looks terrible by August. Maybe that's not the plant for me because I don't want to do a bunch of extensive watering out in my landscape. And so maybe I need to think about plants that would do better. But it's amazing. The garden will be so different in the spring once we get some rain and snow and everything.
Well, and once they're able to rest for winter, and that's why they say gardeners stay young their whole lives because they always have hope.
That is true. We always have hope.
There you go.
That is
Also,
a good question.
One more thing. Keep in mind now that you're going to have to drain those hoses and bring in your hand sprayers before a freeze comes. You've got some time, but just keep that in mind. Don't leave that stuff out there and don't leave your water on. And I actually disconnect my hoses from my silcox, from my faucets on my house.
Uh-huh.
I do not drain my irrigation system like Carol does, like you do, because I don't have to, but I do all that other stuff. So, and people ask me in the winter if I water. Yes, I do when it's 40 degrees and above occasionally.
In Indiana and points north, you need to disconnect your hoses, drain them, and take them inside to the garage or the shed for the winter. You're not going to use them in December, January, February.
No.
And if you have an irrigation system like I do in front, the guys have to come and they literally blow it out. They turn off the water and they blow it out so that there's no more water in those pipes. Because if you leave water in the pipes, freeze thaw, freeze thaw, freeze thaw, break, 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 it'll be very expensive to repair.
Usually here that doesn't happen. But I do have all of my hoses on hose carts, the big hose carts.
Uh-huh.
And we take them all, we lift them in the back of our tractors, the little tractor trailer deals, and we run them all up to our shop inside. And let them all drain out, let them stay there all winter. And then in the spring, we have it all fresh again. So those are just, think ahead.
Yeah. And I've converted to those very lightweight cloth hoses that I bought at Sam's Club that you can lift with one finger, practically a whole 50-foot roll. I love those. I can't say enough good things about them. I'm sick of those heavy hoses. But anyway, I'll do a quote and let's talk about flowers.
Let's do.
It was a lovely afternoon. Such an afternoon as only September can produce when summer is stolen back for one more day of dream and glamour. L.L. Montgomery on Emily Climbs.
Love it.
Love
Flowers.
it.
So we wanted to talk this week.
Oh, by the way, September's not stealing back. It's just set itself. I mean, summer hasn't stolen back. It's just set itself down here and just enjoying September like the rest of it. And I'm like, move on, move on, move on. But anyway, our topic.
I mean, I feel like we've gotten a reprieve. We're having these beautiful, cool mornings, and yeah, it still gets up to 85, but that's okay. All right. So, how to extend the beauty of the garden into fall? Here we go. Ready? How do we do that, Carol?
So first of all, is you should think about planting perennial shrubs and trees with berries or colorful fall flowers or leaves. And so in my garden, the asters get to shine right now, and the Japanese anemones, which always sounds like an enemy, but anemone, they are blooming quite nicely. And some of the mums in the ground are also showing some good color. So that is how you extend the beauty. One way you can do it.
And like our last three episodes, we shared all of our favorite shrubs, perennials, and trees. So you guys can go back if you haven't listened to those and see what we talked as our favorites. Here, the asters are just getting ready to bloom, and it's spider season because all the spiders are out. And which I personally like spider season because I love the garden spiders. And also the mums are just getting ready to bloom, but they'll bloom in October. So, and by mums, we don't mean the mums that are trimmed into balls. We're talking about true garden mums that spread throughout the garden and do their thing. And I just moved a bunch of those. It's a good time to do that. So then what else do you do?
So the other thing you could do is if you have containers that are old and tired with summer annuals that have met their demise, you could, if you wanted to, go and refresh those containers with things like, oh, I don't know, pansies, violas. There's a lot of really
Mums?
pretty mums, ornamental kales, ornamental cabbages. There's even some grasses that you can buy now that are really pretty.
They are really pretty. And you can also here use things like ornamental peppers, crotons, some tropical plants that have beautiful fall color, but they won't they won't last into late November. But if you're trying to, but it's hot. So it's kind of a trial and error thing.
It's like a second season, and good garden centers have refreshed their stock. And so, like when I went down to get my pansies and violas, they had tons of gourds and pumpkins. They'll get 2 or 3 more shipments of mums. And our tip on mums is don't buy them in full color. Buy them with the bud just breaking and barely showing color. You'll have blooms a lot longer.
You will, and it'll cheer you. It'll make you happy. Don't forget to water them. All right, so you can also put together displays of pumpkins and interesting gourds. And Carol has a tip in here to watch out for squirrels getting them, which I don't have too much trouble with that, but I know a lot of people do.
That's true. And then there is that other tip, which is to take a very mild bleach solution or one of those Clorox wipes. And if you wipe that pumpkin or gourd off, it kind of gets rid of some of the molds and mildews and things, and that might last a little bit longer. But you don't want to have a squirrel eating something that's been treated by bleach, that's for sure. But I think they'd stay away from because of the
I think they
smell.
would too. And some people do other things to their pumpkins too, but look that up on Pinterest if you're interested.
I have my little corn patch out there, and I thought, should I cut those stalks and make one of those little, bundles
Displays.
and put that out? And I'm like, that's a lot of work. I don't know. We'll see. If I cut them and they look nice, we'll see.
They're also kind of moldy, so I probably won't do that right now because I don't need to be into the mold. I'm just
No,
now getting over all of the ragweed, which by the way, I need to say something about this. The neighbor across the lake has mowed down 95% of his ragweed. He
that's
cleaned
excellent.
up his lot. Thank you, neighbor across the lake.
That's
All right.
excellent.
So, and when I did a little video of it, I mentioned the fact that the lake is lower than it used to be, a lot lower. And I mentioned the pot growers that are sucking all the water out of the aquifer. And people were like, pot growers? And I was like, yeah, there's like 4 pot facilities, grow facilities around my property now because I live out in the boondocks where there are no rules. So, also, that was just an aside. Just weed your garden, dang it. In other words, it's time to do what I've been doing, editing, taking things out, looking at what looks good, thinking about the fact that I have these beautiful Cleopatra cannas out here and a beautiful Australia canna. And I think I need an Australia canna on the right hand side to just finish that line. And, just things like that.
Yeah. And so weeds like foxtails are very prevalent right now. The dreaded mulberry weed is very prevalent right now. They're setting seed. Grab them with the seed intact and throw that in a trash bag. Don't mulch that in place because they will come back next late summer with a vengeance. So it's a good time to pull that out. Yeah.
Yeah, get it out. And also get it at its root system because mulberry weed is another know your enemy weed. And it snaps off because it's
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
And so you have to get down there and get right under it. And guess what you could use? Your coat.
The cobra head weeder, your cobra head weeder. The other thing we should say is you don't have to go through and deadhead all your perennials and everything, unless you don't want self sowing of some of those, which can be a problem. But if there's annuals in your flower beds that have kind of met the end of life, just pull those out. They're not going to be refreshed. Just pull them out.
Yeah, and wherever you pull stuff out, put down some mulch because you need to refresh your mulch anyway. And on top of that, if you put down some mulch there, that those stupid weeds won't immediately come back up. You'll have a little bit of time. Also, fluff up your mulch. I noticed at church that the landscapers came through and they fluffed up all the mulch in front of the church. I was like,
Makes a difference.
go landscapers.
That's good. So we already talked about if it's obviously dead, get rid of it. And then you said garden bullies. You have wild ageratum, which I don't have here. I'm assuming that botanical name that you put there is the botanical name for wild ageratum.
It is because it's not truly an ageratum. It's.
Would you like me to say that?
I can say it.
Okay.
Ready? I'm going to try.
Okay.
Conoclinium callistinum. Is that close?
That is as good as I would do.
And so that is a definite native that is kind of a bully in Oklahoma gardens and in Texas, or well, northern Texas. And there's nothing wrong with leaving some of it because monarch butterflies love it, but it will take over your whole garden if you don't pull some of it out. So we pulled out some of it. And then also, it's a time, if you do this sort of thing, to turn your compost.
Yes, because you will have more to add to it. And so I should go out and take the one compost bin and turn it over into the other compost bin. I put the little air quotes around should. We'll see if that gets done. I am a very lazy composter.
I am too. So, and you know what? Nature's a lazy composter too, and she does just fine. So don't get obsessed about making your garden completely neat and clean unless Linda Vatter's coming to film it. And it's okay to leave your perennials standing through winter because why, Carol?
Well, many pollinators have laid eggs in those stems, and that's where they overwinter. So leave them be. No pun intended.
Oh, cute. I didn't even catch that.
All right,
you ready for the next quote?
I am.
We breathe air exhaled from trees whose leaves are made of starlight. Our veins echo the patterns of rivers, branches, and root systems. We are not a part of nature. We are nature. And I'm going to do her name and just give me a break. Maricia Miranowska. She's an author. And I just found that quote and I thought it was beautiful.
That is very good.
Vegetables.
Vegetable gardens. So right now there's all these things that says, oh, it's time to plant kale and turnips and beets and other fall crops. And you can sow seeds and up the greenhouse. They have seedlings for kale. They have seedlings for, what else do they have seedlings for? Arugula, lettuce, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbages. And it's like, pass.
So you're going to pass, and I might do some lettuce out my back door, and I'm definitely going to plant those turnips this week. So yes, some things can really handle the cold. Sometimes in my climate, you can overwinter lettuce with cover. You're going to have to cover it, row covers, and you can also use cold frames, and you can also use it for turnips, kale, beets, a few really cold hardy things.
Spinach.
But spinach is another one. Spinach sometimes grows better in the fall to be overwintered than does a lot of other stuff. But I want you guys, those of you who have been asking me about fall gardening, there's a multitude of you who have been asking, I'm going to refer you to the Oklahoma State University Extension Service. And they have several PDFs on fall gardening and everything it takes to make it happen, because it is a good time to start some things, but sometimes we get hit with a really big cold snap. So you've got to be ready with row covers, cold frames.
Right.
There's lots of things you have to do. And also sometimes it can be too hot for some seeds. It's a complicated thing.
It is. And so I don't really want to mess with row covers and everything. I'm kind of like, oh, the frost has happened. We're done. Although some things can very much tolerate frost, such as the spinach, kale, carrots. They can all tolerate some frost and everything. So it is a preference, and there are some excellent resources out there. Our friend Nikki Jabor has a whole book about gardening in the wintertime, which I will remember to put a link to that because she talks about row covers, and she's She's really made a profession out of it, I guess, the whole 4 seasons where she always has something to harvest way up in Nova Scotia where they get a pretty good snow cover sometimes.
Right. And she'll flat tell you, because I've watched a couple of her really great videos. And one of the things she says is, in winter, you're not really growing, you're harvesting, because
That's right.
there's not enough sunlight. So a lot of this has to do with sunlight too. So Nikki Jabor is the 4 season gardener. She does winter gardening better than anybody. I always say buy her books if you want to be a winter gardener.
There you go. So I am not going to be a winter gardener. And you know what I will grow in the winter to eat? Say it with me. Microgreens.
Microgreens.
More on that in
All
a little
right.
bit.
And
I'll
you
do a
don't have
quote.
to have a winter fall garden. Don't make people push you into it. You just do
That's
whatever you
right.
want to do.
Exactly. Which is what we do. So here's the quote. Autumn is the antidote to stifling summer. Terry, I don't know how to say that last name.
I'd say Guillemette.
Guillemets.
No.
Guillemets.
I think
Terry.
she's French, so I
I
don't think we
think she
pronounce the
is.
S on the end, but Terry, we love your quote. Onto the bookshelf. All right. So we got this wonderful book. We almost squealed with delight when we saw that they were publishing a new book by Barbara Damrosch. We love Barbara Damrosch. She doesn't know who we are. I know she doesn't.
No, she has no idea who we are.
But we know her. And so she's written many, many books about gardening. And this new one is called A Life in the Garden: Tales and Tips for Growing Food in Every Season. So if you're wanting to do that fall garden, buy Barbara's new book if you don't buy Nikki's, and we will link to it. And it comes out on October 1st. So maybe buy Nikki's book just to, start, and then buy Barbara's book too, because she knows more about growing food. She and Nikki and Elliot Coleman, who is her husband, they know more about growing food than I'll ever know.
And the other thing I would say is your local library is your best friend. I know a lot of times people say, well, you guys got review copies. And indeed we did. Nikki's books I know are in my public library, and they're probably in most sizable public libraries. A Life in the Garden, I can almost guarantee this one's going to end up in the library. And
Sure.
I first got introduced to Barbara Damrosch, and I brought it here to show you. You remember Theme Gardens, don't you?
So Theme Gardens is the book that started me gardening.
Yes.
Completely. Came out in 1982. I was
Yes.
still in college, living in a dorm, walked across the street, and in the little bookshop, gift shop that was across the street that I used to go into to like de-stress, there was this book, and I had no money. And I bought this book, and I would dream every day. And that book started me on the road to gardening. There's a butterfly garden in there, a rose garden in there, all the things that I grow still. So thank you, Barbara.
Yes. And I bought it probably right after I started working in IT. I go back to gardening a long way, but I just thought it was a really interesting concept. And so I'm going to guess that I bought it when I started making money in IT, and I have really enjoyed it. It's a permanent addition on my shelf. It's even got a little stamp where I once had a stamp for my first house address. This book belongs to, and it's got my first house address on it. So
Cute.
But
so she's written a lot of books, but back to the current one.
A Life in the Garden, I would say, and I haven't looked at the Amazon descriptions or whatever, but I'd say it's a bit of memoir and also tons of great gardening information. And if you could imagine Barbara coming to your house, or you going to Barbara's house for a week and just talking about gardening all week, and she steps you through all the stuff that she does and has stories along the way, that's what this book is.
So I've got to read this one review that I found on bookshop.org. It's lovely. It says, "To me, Barbara Damrosch is the Julia Child of gardening. Barbara was one of the people who made, quote, sustainable, end quote, small scale, end quote, and, quote, compost, end quote, household words. She practically invented the edible gardening movement." This is by Phyllis Odyssey, the New York Botanical Gardens Plant Talk.
Yes, and some of that got on the back cover.
That is, yes, it did. And that's what I would say about this book is that I think Barbara and Sharon Lovejoy and so many other people from that time period changed everything about the way we feel about gardening. And this is kind of a memoir.
It is. And so I'll read something she wrote about the book because at the beginning she talks about how she and her mother and her three sisters that they would make a 3-day journey from New York to Louisiana where her mother was from every summer. And no planes, just trains and automobiles. But anyway, she says, and oh, by the way, Elliot Coleman is her husband.
Yes.
They got married in 1991.
Yes.
And many people are familiar with Elliot Coleman's books as well on gardening.
And they've written a book together too, I think.
I think so.
So I think they did. There maybe more than one. They've written so many things. And you know what we didn't mention, Carol, that we should have?
What?
The garden primer.
Oh, yeah.
That taught me to garden.
Yeah. Why didn't we?
I don't know. We just didn't think about it. But then when I was looking at her book, I went, oh, yeah, that one.
So she writes about this new book, A Life in the Garden. So this is a love story, but it's also about the ways our lives have been enhanced by working with the natural world. I'd like to share some of the knowledge that has made growing food such a pleasure for me, not just the techniques I've learned, but also the mindset that it takes to learn them. It's about giving up some control and letting natural forces do much of the labor. And then she goes on to say that she's in mid-coast Maine, so her climate is going to be different than some people's. So
Sure.
you do have to kind of do that climate translation. She goes on to say, good gardening always requires a measure of flexibility. It is not a struggle, either mental or physical. It is an art of adaptation, contemplation, and expansion of the mind. Many find it addicting.
Oh, yeah. It's so addicting. And you know what? I'm sitting here just musing on that because when I meet with garden coaching clients, many of them are frustrated because it's not easy to garden, but the longer you do it, the better you get at it. It's a craft. I always tell people it's an art and a craft.
Yes. And so this is a fairly extensive book. I mean, it extends to, I think it's like close to 400 pages. Oh, that's about 370 or so.
Yeah.
But I think it's well worth the time to spend reading it. I haven't read the whole thing. I've gotten through the first
Me
chapter,
neither.
and I know I love it. So again, this is one that's going to sit out, and I'm going to read it somewhat like a novel or a story. It's just going to take me into some great places. I know.
Yeah. I'm at a point in my life where I don't tend to read gardening books cover to cover unless there's a story. And there's a story in this one. And I felt that way about, I just lost the train of thought. Oh, Tova Martin's book, In Every Sense and Season.
Yes.
That one told a story too. And she's another one in this group of great writers that I just love. So this is a lovely book. It comes out on October 1st. Ask for it for Christmas or your birthday. It's a good one.
Again, that is A Life in the Garden, Tales and Tips for Growing Food in Every Season by Barbara Damrosch. And I think this is going to be a book that a lot of gardeners get if they got any sense about them.
And Carol, guess what? A monarch just landed on one of my flowers outside.
What is that a sign of?
I think it's a sign that it's monarch approved.
There you go. Do that next quote and let's talk about our dirt.
September is the month of maturity, the heaped basket and the garnered sheaf. It is the month of climax and completion. September. I never tire of turning it over and over in my mind. It has warmth, depth, and color. It glows like old amber. Patience strong. Ooh, that one gave me chills.
And Patience Strong is an old writer. That's a pen name. I kind of don't remember all the details, but I know enough to know that is an old garden or writer.
And she may be one of your lost ladies. You just never know.
She's not a lost lady, but I've researched her in the past. And so I wish I had seen that and done a little research before we got going. But anyway, our dirt is that plants are amazing.
Yes. And so I found this on the first one on Instagram, and it was from Texas Gardener Magazine. And you guys should follow Texas Gardener Magazine on Instagram. He is delightful and he does a great job of talking about different things. And this time of year, he talked about snow on the mountain or snow on the prairie, which is this weed that grows all throughout our cultivated fields and where cattle are. And the reason it's out there this time of year blooming and looking exquisite is because it's poisonous to cows and they don't eat it, and horses. So
Right.
its botanical name is Euphorbia bicolor. And the sap of this poinsettia cousin is shown to have pain-killing properties that don't contain the same addictive components or compounds as opioids. And so it was just so cool that he shared this. And then I shared it on my stories and he goes, "Thanks, Dee." And I said, "I am so talking about this on the podcast." So scientists are now studying this weed and they are going to try to isolate these compounds and produce them. And then maybe we can have some pain medicine that doesn't hurt people. And wouldn't that be nice?
That would be nice. And I think the herbalist would say that all the cures that mankind needs are found in the plant kingdom.
Yeah.
So I saw something, and I think I saw it on Instagram, but I couldn't find the source. So I just looked it up. American beautyberry, and then also the Japanese beautyberry, the Calicarpa americana. And I think the other one is Calicarpa.
Japonica.
Yeah, japonica, which
I
I
have both
have.
of them. I have both of them. That's why I knew. And I just did an Instagram on them. So we'll have to link to that, but it isn't about what you're going to talk about.
Well, basically, what it is the beautyberry leaves can be crushed to make an insect repellent soap. And the guy showed, pulling off a bunch of beautyberry leaves and then kind of rubbing them together, and like it does start to foam up like soap.
Uh,
But they've done some studies and discovered that there's compounds in there that have shown, quote, amazing natural insect repellent properties, proving the worth of the centuries old practice of placing leaves under mule harnesses to deter biting insects.
yeah,
So,
because as you use the mules, then it would crush the leaves, so it would let off those compounds.
no, we should be certain that to say we are not suggesting that you go pick euphorbia to ease your pain. We are also not suggesting that you go get some beauty berries and rub them together and think that it's an insect repellent. As the article that I found would say, they still have a lot of safety testing to do as far as how they would use beautyberry leaves to create a safe, non-toxic insect repellent. But anyway,
Right.
it's showing a lot of promise. Could match DEET, they said, as far as repelling mosquitoes. So plants are amazing.
And I'm just going to see how plants are amazing. I'm going to insert one thing here. Picaridin actually deters both mosquitoes and ticks better than DEET, and it doesn't stink. So if you're trying to deter things, right now the two big things on the market are DEET and picaridin, and then of course there's essential oils. But unfortunately, in my part of the world, I don't think essential oils cut it right now. And your best bet is permethrin clothing. That's all I'm going to say. Don't put permethrin on your skin, though. Don't do
No,
that.
no. All right. Rabbit holes. D, you don't have one listed.
I don't, but you haven't done the quote yet.
Oh, I'll do the quote.
I'll think about it.
How smartly September comes in like a racing gig, all style, no confusion. Eleanor Clark.
Okay, my rabbit hole is studying how smooth ironweed grows in the garden so I can figure out how to get it out. And
There you
I
go.
went down a long rabbit hole to research it because when I first stuck that shovel into the soil next to it, it was so tight I couldn't get the shovel in there. So it took some work, but I figured it out. That's
Excellent.
all.
So mine is arsenic and old gardening books.
Yeah.
So I was on Instagram minding my own business when a post from Denver Botanic Garden pops up, and they were talking about what they wear gloves to handle artifacts and what they don't. And I'd always heard that most of the times when handling old books, you do not want to wear gloves because the oils in your hand are not going to damage the books, and it's easier to tear pages accidentally and mess it up when you're wearing gloves.
Right.
But then she pointed out that in the Victorian era, in the 19th century, to make books green, they would use an arsenic substance to make it emerald green.
You have a lot of green books.
I have a lot of green books. And so but that was in the 19th century. And then I didn't think anything of it, but they showed like 4 green books. And one of them is exactly like a bunch of green books that I have that are like part of a set that were published in the early 1900s. So down the rabbit hole I go. I found something called the Poison Book Project, where they've been testing old books from the 19th century because ones that are like yellow or even red can contain chromium, lead, not just arsenic. And
basically the same thing that they used to put in rot resistant wood. Remember?
Yes. Yes.
It was CCA.
So anyway,
I don't know. It's a
long story, even longer. I did write a blog post about it that got published this morning. And I looked through my catalog of books. And so I have 16 that were published in between 1820 and one that 1901. I had 20 because I picked the one that they had. So I put those together on a top shelf. And then I thought, you know what? A bunch of the books like they showed are like 1901, 1902. And there's like 36 books that are 1901 to 1910. So sometime this week, I'm going to find all those. And then I'm putting them all together. I'm going to make a little bookmark, say, handle with gloves, because I have never had a problem. But there's no way to test for arsenic in your home. You have to have some lab equipment. And they're really only testing like institutional libraries that people get interested and say, well, we've got some old books. But the best, thing is to wear just those blue nitrile gloves when you handle them. Anyway.
Right.
That was quite the rabbit hole because I'm like, I'm going to die of arsenic poisoning. I'm going to die of arsenic poisoning. I'm not going to die of arsenic poisoning.
No, you'd have to remember, people used to use arsenic in their cosmetics.
Oh, yeah. There's a whole thing about Napoleon loved that green color and he had arsenic in his wallpaper, and they felt like that led to his demise because he was just surrounded by arsenic. It was in clothing. And one site said you'd kind of have to eat the cover to die from arsenic poisoning from it.
Yeah, but it can't be good for you to keep handling it because it goes through your skin. Which is you might also put plastic covers on them, but then they don't breathe. I don't know. That's a tough one.
Well, you can buy archival book covers, like book bags that are archival, that I think it would be safe to put them in there. But I have like 36 in the 1900 to 1910 category. So altogether I have, what is that? That's 52 books.
That's a lot.
Well, I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to make a little book that says use gloves, and I'm going to put them on the top shelf. I suppose if you had pets and you left a book on the floor and your dog started chewing on it, that might cause issues. Yeah, because arsenic was used as rat poison.
Yes, it was. It was used way up until a long time, way past then. I don't want to say a date because some expert on rat poison will write in and go, that's not correct. So,
yeah. So anyway, and somebody's going to say, Carol, you're not going to die from your books. I'm like, I'm not going to die from my books, but I'm going to be a little bit careful until I get some more information. That's all.
Good idea. Garden commissions. You want me to go first since I didn't write anything down?
Well, it'll be a big surprise to me.
I also went to Boostani Plant Farm because last Saturday was my birthday. So I went on Thursday, I think.
Yes.
And I still have some plants to plant.
You need to get those in the ground, Dee.
For the sweet people who asked for the hostas that I was going to dig up in last week's episode.
Yeah.
Those went away. So I'm so sorry. Can't give you those. Besides, they weren't good hostas. They were just old because I'm not a hosta person. So I didn't have specialty hostas. They were probably ones from Lowe's that you can buy for $5.95.
Although, Dee, when you were here in Indianapolis for GardenCom, we went to Soul's Garden, and I remember you bought guacamole.
I did, and I actually gave that one to someone.
Okay,
so
just saying
because I don't want the deer eating them. So I bought some deer-resistant plants for the shade garden. So I'm going to go in there and plant those, and I'm also moving some zinnias that I started over in the potager and got up to a certain height. Realized that they're peach, and I'm going to go put them in my tiered gardens and snip off the tops so they can start to bulk out. And so I'll have peach zinnias running
Too
through.
late to do that in Indiana, by the way. Too late to do that in Indiana.
Not too late here. So that's all.
All right. Well, like I said, we need some rain, but until then, I have no great plans other than I'm going to start watering, maybe even the back and do some weeding, do some freshening up with different things. And also, there's a few house plants that I need to bring inside. And so I'm going to start bringing those inside.
What's this presentation that you put down on here? I
So,
didn't know you were given another one.
yeah, I'm giving another presentation. So, long story, even longer, as they say. The local hospital, Franciscan, where I used to be in IT, they have a group called Senior Promise, which you can join when you're like 55. And then they host talks and programs. And so when I was talking to the woman about my Medicare sign up last year, she asked, what do I do? And I told her I garden a lot and then I write about it and speak about it. And she said, "Oh, would you speak to Senior Promise?" I'm like, "Sure." So I didn't think anything of it until like, I don't know, spring. She sends me an email and says, "How about September?" And I'm like, "Okay." So the topic is what you can do in your garden in the fall. And I'm going to twist it around and say top 10 questions people have in the fall. Like, can I plant my mums now? Is it too late to plant these bulbs? But the big show is going to be microgreens. And so starting Tuesday, I plant like one little 5x5 container of microgreens every 2 days. And so I can talk to them about growing microgreens and I can take that flat in and I'll have, okay, this was 2 weeks ago. Is that going to be right? This was 13 days ago. This was 11 days ago. This was 9 days ago. And so they can see the progression. Anyway.
That's cool. They'll love that because it's alive. That's very good.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought it
I'm
was a good
speaking
idea.
too in October.
I knew that at the Oklahoma State Master Gardeners Conference.
Yeah. I forget and then it gets a little closer and I go, oh yeah, I'm doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm doing that. So after that, I have no speaking engagements on the calendar.
I don't either. And that's okay. Oh, you also said you're going to take cuttings of your African blue basil, which
yes, pretty soon I'm going to do that. And
I'm going to start doing that too. And actually, it's not that hot here, so I'm thinking about taking some of my begonias I've moved. Okay, so the deer got into one of my begonias again. So I put it into the potager and on the shelf, on one of the sides of the beds over there where it can't get to it. And then I've also been thinking about taking my pelargoniums and going ahead and putting them in my greenhouse because they can handle the heat. And
yeah, and the reason I'm leaving my pelargoniums out is because I want them to start going a little bit dormant, and then I move them into the garage just sit there dormant through the winter. So I'm not messing with those. And on the African blue basil, like I said, this spring I had one cutting that rooted and stayed through the winter. And you would not believe how big and lovely that plant is.
Oh, I would, because I've grown it. It is a great border plant.
I just need one. So I'm going to start with 10, put them in a big pot all together. And if one of them makes it, I'm golden.
Yeah. Maybe next week we should talk about plants that would be good for the front of the border. I don't know. Anyway, I think that's it for this week.
That is it. I'm also going to, by the way, bring in that poinsettia and see if it'll change colors. Time will tell.
Yeah. No, thank you. Okay.
I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
If you subscribe to our free Substack newsletter, which is dandy, by the way, you'll get a link to listen to the podcast a day early.
And if you want to help support us, use our affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we're in a small commission and it costs you nothing.
Or you can set up a monthly subscription through BestVote. Quite a few of you have, and we really appreciate it. Or you can make a one-time donation through PayPal.
Thank you to everyone who has done so. It helps us pay for podcast hosting.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.